Welcome to episode 144 of Convos in the Pedicab. I'm here with my friend Nina Volk. Nina was one of the spokeswomen for the IDF back when she served in the Israeli army, and I figured this would be I can't really think of a better time than now to have somebody who's kind of has a boots on the ground, real familiarity in terms of this horrible thing that's happened. So maybe we can make sense of it, because there's a lot of crazy stuff that we're hearing on social media and seeing, and you don't know if half of it's true or not. So it's good to, I'm really excited that you're here and we get to talk to a primary source. So let's get this thing started.
Hi, how are you?
I'm doing good.
Yeah, so I served in the IDF in the spokesperson unit from 2020 to 2022. And it was a wild experience, and we learned a lot.
Can you tell us a little bit about the spokesperson unit?
So there are many parts of the spokesperson unit. In Hebrew, it's called Dover Tzal, which is Dover is someone who speaks in the army. And so there's Israeli media. For the international media, there's Israeli media, which is in Hebrew. There's Arabic. And then the international spokesperson unit, which was English, Russian, Spanish, and French. And of the international spokesperson unit, there were three parts of it, which is social media, which is what I did. Kind of the unit that answers to the New York Times and inquiries and like traditional media. And a unit that kind of, if people want to come visit, we'll take them around and show them different bases. So okay. I was in the first of those.
All right. And I probably should have asked sooner, but is everything okay? Is everything okay with you and your family?
Yeah, most of my close family's here, and my further family lives in northern and central Israel. But a lot of my friends are now in reserves, so they're on base.
They're on base.
Almost everybody.
Okay. Yeah, I'm lucky too, I guess. Nothing happened to any family or friends or anything that live in Israel, so thank God. How concerned are you for your friends that are in reserves?
A lot of the time it feels like everyone's kind of holding their breath. And I'm concerned for my friends in combat. Most of my friends were in the spokesperson unit, and it's more in central Israel, but it feels like impending anxiety. So
what do you think, as somebody who's has a familiarity with the issue, right? What do you see happening, right? What do you see happening going forward? We're asking a lot of heavy questions, and I appreciate you coming on. And it's important to just really discuss this as calmly and as not matter of factly, but as calmly and as clear-headed in a fashion as we can, because this is horrifying and it's scary, and it feels like people are being manipulated into picking sides and fighting with each other instead of trying to and instead the focus should be avoiding a catastrophe.
That's true. I think everybody is trying to contain this issue, which is why Biden keeps saying to those who want to take advantage of the situation, don't. This is an unprecedented event. Even in the 2015's Intifada, South Lebanon, all the wars, I mean, this is the most people being killed since the Holocaust. And it's because of its unprecedentedness and the brutality of the event. I had friends who were like, show me the pictures. And being that the IDF, what do I think is going to happen? There may be a ground invasion. Nobody wants that.
No, I think that, like I said, you're the expert on this, so whatever. If I say anything incorrect, I want you to correct me. But I feel like a ground invasion is a disaster.
It's going to be a disaster for both sides. Obviously, everything I say is only of my opinion. I don't think anybody wants that. We don't, like, the IDF doesn't want to send their children into Gaza. We left Gaza in 2005. And the whole world hoped that it can become a Singapore, that it has its port, it can be a port city, and there could have been so much that happened there. And unfortunately, Hamas as leadership kind of, I mean, the leaders sit in Qatar and they take all the money and all the aid from the people. The people have nothing. The only initiatives people have is to do terrorist acts. They make money by building tunnels under the ground. They make money. I mean, each hostage was worth $10,000. $3 million were just paid out by the PA to those families. Kids are being taught very hateful things from elementary school. So I think the IDF is going to want to go in and get to the tunnels, which there are many of. All of the concrete that the world sends in, instead of being used to rebuild Gaza and make it better, it's being used to create tunnels where a lot of the electricity is being sent, a lot of the food is being hoarded, and likely where the hostages are.
Okay, so Nina, with that being said, I'm seeing some of the videos coming out of Gaza, and it looks like they're turning this place into a parking lot. You know what I mean? Like some of the, and like I said, you don't know what's real and what isn't real. And sometimes people use footage from decades ago or from years ago or from like from a period of time ago that's irrelevant and say that this is happening in Gaza because propaganda is heavy and everybody wants to get clicks and monetize things. And even when there's an unspeakable tragedy, people would rather grift and get views on social media than actually try to figure out the truth. But from what I've been seeing, that region looks like it's been totally decimated as a response to what's happened. What's happened is horrible, and these people are total animals for what they did. So there's never going to be any sympathy for Hamas, and Israel should always be allowed to assert its independence, especially considering what's happened to Jews over forever, right? But with that being said, this still did happen. People are seeing this. The views and the images are not helping us. You know, from what I'm seeing on social media, it's not helping show support for the Jewish struggle. And also, just from a strategic standpoint, wouldn't it be hard to find these tunnels in the midst of all the rubble that was created by all the bombings?
Yeah. So there are a few things to say about that. Old footage. So Hamas controls the Gaza Strip, which is including the health ministry. So, for example, with the hospital bombing, they said it hit the hospital, 500 people. We still don't know how many people were killed 2 weeks ago. We're still finding bodies and fragments and parts. And, I mean, there are videos, you can find them, of Hamas staging, people being put on stretchers, using ketchup, and then them getting up and doing another
really?
Take. Yeah.
You got to send that to me because I totally believe that too.
Yeah. The suffering in Gaza is real. And the IDF does everything it can using, tapping bombs and using leaflets. They call people. And unfortunately, there are some people who Hamas will force people to stay where they are because the more casualties, the better. And which is part of a bigger cultural kind of incentive, which is if you are martyred, you bring pride to your family
and you get paid.
People say that there's nowhere to go. There are places to go. So Israel lit all of the electricity in South Gaza because they have strong suspicion that all the tunnels are in the north, where many of the hostages are being held, where a lot of the arsenal is. Yeah.
Okay. So, because you're hearing stuff about how, how these the Gaza Strip and the West Bank are just getting just obliterated. And yes, the Israeli army will always tell people what they're doing before they do it.
Yeah.
And Hamas will just, sneak up on you and, attack women and children at a music festival. And that is a very obvious, discernible difference.
Part of the obliteration is because the tunnels are underground and they're not built well. So when the IDF tries to get a tunnel, the rest of the street will concave pretty quickly into that gap.
So anytime the IDF blows up a tunnel, the whole street just gets destroyed.
A lot of the time,
not because of the Israelis being brutal, but because of the Hamas's inability to build the roads.
Yeah, the infrastructure is not stable. So I mean, the tunnels aren't so far from the surface. So a lot of the times during impact, you'll see that there's a much higher slant than there should be.
Okay. Yeah, that's crazy. And it's funny because like you go on mainstream media and there's one side or another side, and no one
Yeah.
ever talks about these details. And that's like another reason why I'm glad they're here, because there are a lot of details that people aren't even aware of.
Plus, Hamas shoots. I mean, all of the operations are being done so close to hospitals. I mean, I don't know if you saw the hospital footage that the IDF released, that of the terrorists talking about like, oh shit, yeah, we shot from the cemetery and that was one of our rockets. I mean, that was released.
I
And
did see something like that,
the
and the
Ernwa
hospital turned out
school.
to be a parking lot.
Yeah.
But then I also saw something where like the Israel bombed a Christian church in Palestine, and I saw something on social media about that today.
All of the operations are being done very close to places that the Western world thinks would be horrible to remove or to for those places to be destroyed or to be hurt. And that's why they shoot out of apartment buildings, out of the roofs of schools, right next to kindergartens, a block away, because they know that the Western reaction will be so severe.
Yeah, because you have to retaliate because you're getting shot at, and then all of a sudden you see a bunch of kids that are dead, and then the education. I've seen some videos coming out of the schools in that region, and you have kids that are like as young as 5 being taught to want to take pride and glory in killing Jews.
Yeah.
And then you have you remember Farfar the mouse?
No.
You never heard of Farfar? He was the Palestinian Mickey Mouse.
Oh, I saw a clip.
The jihadist Mickey Mouse, and that used to be a children's cartoon like in the West Bank years ago, back right when Hamas got elected.
Yeah.
I
mean, you'll see interviews of Ernwa students that are like 10 years old. They're like, I'm ready to kill Jews now. We are taught at this school, which is supported by the UN.
By the UN, yes, yeah.
To kill Jews, to stab them, that they're a poison, that they're a cancer. I mean, that's what everyone's saying.
But then people call the UN Zionist or the media Zionist at the same time, which I never understood that.
Yeah, I mean, if they were, we'd be doing a better job. Just like people claim ethnic cleansing, and the Palestinian population has grown 6-fold since 1960. So I guess we're not wary. Yeah, it is true.
Ethnic cleansing has grown 6-fold?
No, I'm saying the population of Palestinians has grown 6-fold.
If
we were trying to do that, then I think we could do it a little better if that was what we wanted to do.
I would assume. Yeah, I mean, you shouldn't want to do that, right?
No, of course, nobody wants that.
Yeah.
But if we control the media, and if this is if all of the things that are being said are true, I think there would be more, there'd be higher numbers by now.
There would be. I mean, yeah. Do you think though? And like we were talking about Hamas, and we were talking about the bombings and stuff by the schools, and one of the things I've noticed, and I'll get to this a little bit later, but and it's not necessarily a bad thing, and I think it's actually a good thing, but it's can create a problem with what we're dealing with right now. But distrust in establishment news sources is non-existent.
Yeah.
And as a result of COVID, and as a result of how they lied about Ukraine, and as a result of the rampant censorship that is being tried to be put out, and a lot of the stuff that was being censored wound up kind of being true looking back later on. I think that distrust in legacy media is actually a good thing in the long term. And I think independent media and independent journalists are going to be the future of how we get and receive information. But that being said, as a result of that, we're at a point now where if the legacy media is going to side, it's almost like you almost don't want the legacy media to side with you if you want popular support. And I think that initially a lot of legacy news outlets were sympathetic to Israel, and that almost hurt us because of how much distrust, has been generated from legacy media outlets.
I think legacy media stopped being relevant when all of these different channels were created in like the 70s and 80s. When there were 3 channels, it was pretty objective, and because there was no internet and it was a simpler life, like it's hard for us to tell what was real and what was fake. And I do believe that journalists had more integrity then. With all of these medias having different leanings and opinions. I mean, the New York Times just posted on Instagram like, hey, sorry, we trusted the terrorists about the hospital. Like, we made a mistake, and everybody ran with that story. So I don't even think the media is trying to, I mean, a lot of people are biased. I mean, these are humans who work for these corporations, but I think it's what gets the most clicks and what people want to see the most, as opposed to fact checking. And so it's kind of complicated. And independent media, the problem that I have with that, and I'm a follower of many, I think any rational person is that you will be in an echo chamber bubble, and you could only watch things that you believe in and affirm what you believe, instead of it's your responsibility as a consumer to look at different medias and have an independent kind of thorough opinion and perspective. So with independent sources, I feel like that's very difficult to do.
I think it's better. I think it's easier actually to have a multitude of perspectives, because with independent sources, you're not under contract to have to use a narrative. Like for me, when I do this podcast, granted, it's not going to get a bazillion. It'll get a small number of views. But I have, because I'm independently operated, I could talk to anybody about anything that I want to talk about. And as a result of me being independent, I have to look at things from multiple perspectives. Like if I wasn't doing this podcast, right? I wouldn't even want to look at the Palestinian side of this because I'm Jewish, right? But then I started thinking about this, right? And when you look at some of these other things that are happening, and you just look at what you're seeing objectively on social media, and when you look at some of the imagery, and you just look at how foreign involvement in the Middle East and interventionism leads to unprecedented hate and division and disastrous outcomes, no matter what. You know, we saw what happened in Iraq. We saw what happens when we go into the Middle East, and there's a precedent of this, even with how the British were, trying to partition Palestine in the 1920s, the teens, and the 30s. You'll start to see things from another perspective. And one of the things I was thinking about was that if I wasn't Jewish, if I wasn't Jewish, I'd probably, from what I see, would probably support the Palestinians. Being that I'm Jewish, you have no choice but to support Israel's right to exist, because if you understand your history, you understand the need to have a sovereign nation. And then if you believe in what you're reading in the Torah, you understand the importance of a place like Israel to Jews. But then at the same token, if I were to live in Israel, I'd want to, go in there and kill as many of these people as possible. Do you know what I mean? So I feel like depending on where you are, you could really, like, your view on this is so, it could be so elastic depending on where you are, if that makes any sense.
Yes. Something that I felt like I struggled with during my service was that everything we posted and everything we did had to be seen by 20 people, including the law department. And the other side doesn't have that. I definitely feel like it is easier to, as Jews, it doesn't mean that we can't support Palestinian civilians in their fight for liberty, freedom, the pursuit of happiness, career.
Yeah, having water and having to be on, having food and
and everything. People deserve to live a full life, right? And when you see pictures coming out of Gaza, it's easy to make assumptions if you don't understand what's going on. If you don't understand that these people are being held hostage by an extremist religious organization, that even if it was from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free, which free from what? Let's say all the Jews disappeared like this from Israel, that still wouldn't be enough for organizations like Hamas and Hezbollah backed by Iran. It's not only Israel that's the problem. It's America, it's the West, and it's everything that we stand for. Tehran in the 70s was beautiful. People dressed the way they wanted. People read and were educated. So was Beirut. Beirut was a party capital of the 70s. This extremist ideology doesn't end with Israel. Israel's just the first domino that they're trying to knock over before the rest of it. And I think the world is finally starting to kind of understand that this is so much bigger and unfortunately more insidious than we understand it to be.
Yeah, it's hard to argue that. I also think that you have to be careful about a lot of, and you're not doing this, but a lot of neoconservatives in Congress and within our White House, and some of these evangelicals will say similar language because they want to provoke a war with Iran,
Yeah.
because there's money to be made in provoking a hot war with Iran. And then if you provoke a hot war with Iran, then all of a sudden now you start strengthening the BRICS countries. Now, Russia all but assuredly will take over Ukraine, and that could have easily been stopped if we allowed a peace talk to take place within 2 months. When these were open offers between Zelensky and Putin. So I guess I'm trying. It's hard to really get a firm handle around this, but sometimes that type of they are funded by Iran, right? And the leaders of Hamas live in luxury villas in Qatar, and they get money not just from Iran, they get money from us, Nina. When Joe Biden gave $100 million to Gaza, to the people in Gaza, you have to be an infantile retard to not understand that money is going to Hamas. Because whether or not the intent is to help people in Gaza, these people, the Hamas organization is so powerful, they're going to just take all the money and all the resources and pocket it for themselves and just use it to build more weapons and more tunnels and create more terrorists. And as a result of the people there having been carpet bombed for the past week and a half, you might, even if you do defeat Hamas, you'll just create a Hamas 2.0, just like back in the 1970s. Hamas was just in its infantile stages fighting against the Palestinian Liberation Organization, and the Israeli government didn't put a stop to this. And as a matter of fact, a lot of the Israeli government and the intelligence agencies allowed Hamas to kind of grow unchecked because they figured it would provide a backstop to the PLO. And they, the thought process was, if we create enough fighting and division in that region, they won't unite to fight against us. And it turned out to be disastrous. So it's always concerning that, you want to wipe out these horrible people, but there should be a plan in place to make it so that you don't get Hamas 2.0 as a result of this.
Yeah, I don't know about the PLO stuff, unfortunately. I have to look into that. But
I've been trying to research that because it is actually fascinating, because especially, I mean, you look at our response to 9/11 and you just try to think of this, and generally speaking, what I've noticed these 3 years is that jumping to conclusions is disastrous, like we did with COVID, with what we did with Ukraine, with everything, what people do in terms of managing their money. When you immediately act in your first reaction, it usually might not be the right reaction. So it's good to take a step back and say, okay, what if this happened? What if that happened? What if you're being manipulated into reacting a certain way? And so I'm trying. That's why I've been trying to research that a little bit more.
I think the issue with people trying to put in leadership for others has always been disastrous. Even the Weimar Republic, after the Germans lost World War I, that democratic Congress that the West kind of instilled in that area that was used to monarchies led to the democratic election of Hitler. And I mean, the Americans know well enough how, you take someone you don't like out, including Iran, you put someone else in, and that doesn't always seem to go in your interest. So I don't think Israel has a big plan for what's next.
And that's a problem.
I mean, people have to feel like they're governing themselves. And it's not like everybody in Gaza hates Hamas. I wouldn't say everybody loves Hamas. I don't know. But I wouldn't say everybody hates Hamas, because in some way they are, in some people's eyes, fighting for their best interest, because they're saying, if you vote for us, if you continue to support us, Israel will be ours. And so people kind of believe in that. And in an ideal situation, we can have maybe people who live in the West who are Palestinian or something else. Or, I mean, just for people to be able to live a good, productive life without holding so hard onto destruction. And I mean, I don't know how that's going to happen. I just think it's too deeply ingrained.
Do you think there is a path for peace?
I mean, Israel may have its problems, but there are more than 2 million Israeli Arabs, many of which were my friends while I was there. I mean, I had Palestinian friends in in Jerusalem. I had Drew's friends, I mean, there's a big Arab and Palestinian population living in Israel, and they're now called Israeli Arabs, but like it's from the same descent, who understand that although Israel is not perfect, they have access to the best universities in the Middle East. They can be doctors and work in court, and they could, and I mean, Israel has always also come to the peace table. There have been 5 offers that the Palestinians have denied. There could be peace.
Can I ask a question about that?
Yeah.
Because at face value, this is 100% true. You know, the Arabs rejected the Peel Commission. They rejected the UN partition. There was the Oslo Accords. There's like a bunch of stuff, right? In these peace deals where there is a 2-state solution, one of the criticisms I heard was that, especially in the beginning, there were a lot more Arabs than Jews in Israel. And the way the land was divided, it was given a lot, like a larger chunk of land was offered to the Israelis, and like a lot of the fertile land and the areas with the best water and stuff like that were given to Israel and not to the.
I don't know if I agree with that.
So that isn't true? Okay. I just want to know. I'm asking because that's what I heard. I want to, you know.
I don't think so, no, because I know that actually Israel brought in trees from the eucalyptus trees from Australia to suck up the water, because the Israelis, I mean, the Jews were giving swampland. And the original UN partition is Israel gets that little like port strip, and then the Arabs would get all of the rest of it, including the east, which is beautiful land, which is the Jordan River and everything else. Israel toiled. I mean, there's not settlers, the immigrants and the native Israelis worked so hard to make that land fertile. It was not perfect land. So now Israel has a eucalyptus problem, because the eucalyptus trees now suck up so much water that it creates drought. And they were originally brought in to suck up all the swamps. So
they're trying to offer that to the Palestinians.
What?
The eucalyptus trees.
I don't know about that.
No, I thought you said that.
No, I mean, the Israelis brought eucalyptus from Australia to suck up the swamps that the Israelis had. That's the land that the Jews got.
Oh, back. Okay.
Yeah. And now it's like an overgrowth of eucalyptus, and now it creates droughts. So the land that the Jews got was not the best land.
And they worked. Okay.
And they worked it.
All right. That makes a lot of sense. And then when you have another faction that's using all the money that they have to just create more bombs and indoctrination centers, it's difficult to want to provide those resources to that people as well. Like that's just a point I totally understand. How do you feel about the settlements that are on the West Bank?
Me personally?
You personally.
I don't know enough about it. From what I understand, growing the settlements more than where they are now shouldn't happen. That's my personal opinion. We have the technology to work the south. We have the technology to work the desert. There are many communities in the desert. Part of it is religious, but I don't know that much about the settlements. From what I know today, if I could, I would stop the increase of the settlements going into the West Bank.
Okay, yeah, I agree with that. Especially, you'll see people, you'll see videos of people in Gaza complaining about, hey, we have no water, we have no food, we're having droughts, we're having all these issues, and then right next to them, or within a couple of miles, there is a gated community with a swimming pool, right above them, and so that's kind of one of those things where I've always wanted to wrap my head around, because, like I said, this is an information war, and when you see that, it doesn't help us gain friends or influence.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel some of it is religion based, and I don't know how much of the claims are true. Just out of my principle today, with the information I have at today, I would urge people to stop growing these communities. Yeah. Okay,
that's fair assessment. How did this even start though? So 2 weeks ago, it's going to be about 2 weeks, right, on Saturday?
Yeah.
Yeah. Largest attack since the Holocaust, right?
Yeah.
The Iron Dome is one of the most sophisticated forms of technology in the world.
Yeah, people don't understand that without the Iron Dome, Israel would be leveled. Leveled.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what they want. People are like, oh, they're just shooting rockets. Like, no, they're trying to level Israel. And without the Iron Dome, that is what would happen. My father served in '91 when we didn't have the Iron Dome, and it was rockets falling on Tel Aviv. Like, I mean, the rockets seem kind of like a joke now because we have the Iron Dome. But even during my serving, there were many times that we, stood at the stairwell and sat in the bunkers. And I mean, so people don't even understand how dangerous these rockets are.
How does the Iron Dome work, just for people that don't know?
So the Iron Dome is an missile kind of rocket. So it uses GPS and the trajectory of the rocket that's coming in to intercept and to explode it. And the Iron Dome missiles cost a lot more than regular rockets do. Maybe, I think, even 100-fold. I mean, the Hamas uses pipes that were supposed to be brought in for water transport for these rockets, plus, all the money that they're getting from other terrorist organizations. The Iron Dome missiles cost so much more money because they have to intercept a rocket that's already has a trajectory and already is kind of moving through the air. It's really incredible technology, and there's a new one that's using lasers now.
Okay, and they use the lasers and the technology to just shoot the rockets down?
Yeah.
Okay.
Or explode them in the spot.
And the Mossad is one of the best intelligence agencies in the world.
Yeah.
And they have people everywhere.
Yeah.
Right? The Mossad, I would assume, has people even in Gaza and in the West Bank and infiltrating every single one of these terrorist organizations.
Probably.
So I guess this brings me to the next question, and is that with such sophistication, how was this attack even allowed to occur? Like, how did the best intelligence agency and the best security apparatus in the world stumble so bad where something like this even happened?
So I think it's a arms race in regards to technology. So yes, first of all, it was a holiday, and Hamas, after the attack, even says, like, yeah, we stopped attacking so much in the last 2 years because we wanted our enemies to have their, eyes down and to not think that we were capable of doing such a thing so soon. It is an incredible intelligence failure. I think part of it is encryption services and chats. Part of it is hackers. What?
How so? Can you explain that a little more?
Like, with double-ended encryption, it's hard to hack into those systems as opposed to the way that it used to be even a few years ago.
Oh, so they were able to operate more secretively?
More secretively.
But couldn't some of these guys just go undercover in that group and just relay the message like, hey, guys, we're about to,
I guess not.
That sounds hard. Okay, anyway.
It's hard to believe. I don't know. I felt it's definitely a huge disappointment for the Israeli intelligence. I mean, there's nothing else to say.
Nothing else to say.
Yeah.
So, but what else? I didn't mean to interrupt you because you were saying a lot of stuff and I wanted...
So the way that Hamas, from my understanding, they kind of hacked the system that keeps the fence. I mean, it was a very high-tech attack, the way that they got the fence to turn off and to get through the fence and to get through everything else.
What did they do?
From my understanding, they hacked into the sorry.
No, it's okay. We're in nature. This is part of the experience.
Yeah. From my understanding, they hacked the sensors around the gate and then were able to get in.
Okay, so they hacked the sensors around the gate and were able to get in.
Yeah, that's my understanding.
And they were were they on paragliders or how did they
Some
walk
people
in?
came on paragliders.
And some just walked in?
I mean, it was an assault from the air and the land and everything else. It was obviously very planned, and Israel obviously wasn't very
not prepared. And on what's the happiest Jewish holiday of the year?
Yeah.
Which I learned about right after. Yeah, it's horrible. Do you think that some of the protests that were going on with Netanyahu had anything to do with that? Had anything to do with there being such an intelligence failure?
It's possible because pilots were threatening to not fly, and a lot of people were very, very, very divided. I definitely think that's a part of it. I think also there was some political talk of like moving the intelligence one way or the other, or kind of moving pieces around. I definitely think that the governmental kind of turmoil contributed to the possibility of this event happening.
That's what I'm assuming too, right? So can you tell me a little bit more about like what these like how bad these protests were and how it was shaking up the country, because that does put a lot of context into things.
Israel is a small country, and there were protests every week, thousands of people. I mean, I went to one, and I'm a lot of people were very, very divided, very spiteful. The coalition was very extremist, and it wasn't in everybody's interests. And I'm not going to get into all the politics now, but I definitely think the division kind of distracted a lot of people from the possibility of something like this happening.
And I'm sure there's also a lot of anger about Netanyahu's response to COVID.
I'm not sure about that.
There wasn't?
I'm not sure.
Just because they did like 5 different lockdowns and they tried to force everybody to get, he used the Israeli population as a science experiment for Pfizer.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know about that too much. Like, I was there during COVID, and people were just angry because, they thought that he's been in the position for too long.
Well, that's what I think too. No one should be in power for 20 plus years.
I agree.
And then he's trying to consolidate the judiciary, so there's no veto power for anything he's doing.
And he was out for a while, and then he was brought back in because he created a big coalition.
Yeah, it's dangerous. And the people that are in his coalition sound like George Bush neocons, and that's not something you need right now when tensions are at an all-time high.
Yeah, it's just a lot of extremists, and I think the secular Jews who work hard and pay taxes and kind of own stake in Israel, it just wasn't in the best interest of the country financially, culturally as a whole.
Okay. And so you see these protests as a result of it, and I'm sure you had people that were pilots and people that worked in the military and people that were in the intelligence community that were furious about this and just said, you know what? If this guy tries to consolidate power, I'm not going to fly. Yeah. I'm going to answer. I'm going to respond to threats 10 minutes later than I should have. And
I don't know if that was part of it. I don't think so, because despite the fighting, Israel, having seen so much horrific events and so much death, can get their shit together really fast, which is one of the reasons why COVID, the response was so fast. I mean, Israel, I got ticketed.
You got ticketed?
I got ticketed for being 1,000 meters away from my house during COVID.
But that's crazy though. Like that type of stuff makes you not want to support a country like this, even though we're Jews and we have to have a country like this.
Yeah, I mean, no country's perfect. I think the Israeli government did what they thought had to do with the information they had at the time.
I think maybe. I think that's another debate entirely, which that's not why we're doing this episode, to talk about COVID. Mm-hmm. But I do think that could have stirred more division and more frustration in Israel. But also, Israel's a very if the Israeli, my take too is that everyone in Israel serves in the IDF, mm-hmm. right?
Mostly. Yeah.
I don't think they have like strict gun control laws. I know that in the settlements they're given weapons in the settlements to protect themselves.
I'm not sure about that.
So but what I was thinking is that if people in Israel were that upset about it, they probably would have revolted and just not let it happen if they weren't willing to comply with it as well. Because I think the Israeli culture is a little different from the American culture.
I think the Israelis know how to shut up and go when shit hits the fan. Yeah. It's a democracy, but it's not like America where, anytime gas prices go up, everyone's furious. Like, life is hard there. So when shit hits the fan, I mean, everyone's kind of on board. There weren't many people who were anti-vax. I got my vaccine. I got my Pfizer earlier than a lot of older people did in America. When shit hits the fan, everyone kind of, can comply. So it's.
So it was a little bit different. They didn't have to. It
wasn't forced. It was recommended, and I think with the information that they had at the time, people.
I thought he had like the green pass where it was like if you didn't get the shot, you had to show that
Yeah.
you
Yeah,
couldn't
yeah.
you couldn't go to the store, you couldn't go do anything if you didn't have your
Yeah,
shot and
you
stuff,
can go to the. I mean,
or you couldn't go to like the bar, you couldn't go to the restaurant if you didn't have your vaccine and stuff like that.
yeah.
And were people complying with that, or was it kind of like here's the
But
pass
that
and
was the way
waiter
that it
was
was in New York and in LA and in many
Yeah, I
other
know, and
places in Italy. Like,
yeah, and a lot
so
of people left those places and came to places like Texas and Florida as a result of that.
it felt like the end of the world, and I think people made the best decisions that they could at the time. I don't blame Israel for being extra precautious.
No, sure. And I guess it's just one of those things where I was wondering if that factored into some of the animosity that people were feeling towards Netanyahu in Israel.
No, I definitely feel like it's political.
Okay. And do you think that this has helped or hurt Netanyahu's political career?
This event,
Yeah.
I think he's done.
You think he's done?
I think he's done. I think he's done. He is the security guy. He should have known. I think he's done.
Do you think someone like Netanyahu could have looked at this as a way to kind of consolidate more power because it's a rallying moment to get Israel united by him, and it's something that's backfiring?
I hope not. Deeply.
But do you think that
I don't.
we're not
I
asking
don't
what you
think
hope,
so.
we're asking what you think.
I know that the Mossad and Israeli intelligence and the IDF does more than any other country to save its hostages and for Jewish life. Released thousands of terrorists. I mean, Israel will not stop for the preservation of life. So, I don't think that's the case.
You don't think so? You think?
But
It's just,
I think that there's enough evidence for people to want to connect those dots. Personally, I don't think that this event will help Bibi more than it will hurt him.
I could see that too, because people saw what happened and then they're like, yeah. Because when this type of a failure happens under his watch, it seems like it's a done deal. But you also got to be worried about people in his cabinet trying to pass like restrictive speech laws and internet laws that could stop criticism of Bibi to keep him in power as well. When you've been in power for 20 plus years, that is a risk that could potentially be on the table, right?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure. I know that a lot of secular people in Israel would want new leadership.
Good.
Yeah,
That's a good.
I
that's
mean,
that's a good thing.
the coalition is a bunch of extremists, and he's kind of, they are supporting him, and they're expecting to get their money back, and a lot of Israeli society doesn't believe in what he's trying to tout for.
And if you're a Palestinian, and this is what I wanted to talk about, and then we started going off on a bunch of other topics. If you're a Palestinian living in Gaza and the West Bank,
Yeah.
how is your range of motion monitored with like the checkpoints and with all that stuff? Or you're like, if you don't want to be in like what people call an open air prison, how easy is it for you to maneuver around that area and like leave? How easy is that for you to leave for commerce and travel, and also leave in terms of just escaping and starting somewhere fresh?
I'm not sure a lot about Gaza specifically. I know that I had a friend who's a Palestinian from Jerusalem who studied at Columbia University. Gaza specifically, I assume that there are pretty harsh checkpoints, but as come out of this event, there were people who were giving working visas to work with the kibbutzim, thousands of people whose IDs were found in the wreckages of South Israel, who used their knowledge of those areas to do this attack. So I think Israel had kind of put its arm out to help Gazans kind of move out and help find work elsewhere and kind of start the peace process or a trust process. And it backfired in this event. I also know that a lot of Israeli hospitals take in Gazan people. I mean, one of my closest friends was in residency in Israel, and she was constantly tending to Gazans in Israeli hospitals. It's a constant thing.
And are people from Gaza allowed to like serve in Israeli parliament, or are they allowed to go to Israeli universities? Like, how does?
I don't think so. They have their own universities, and Israeli Arabs may. I'm not sure, and I don't think that Gazans can.
So how could you go from being a resident of Gaza to becoming an Israeli Arab? Because the regions are pretty similar, and I went to Israel twice, right? And when I went to the Wall, you had mosques and you had mosques, churches, everything in Israel. Like you could worship however you want in a place like Israel super freely. You go to the other side, that might not, I can't walk around Gaza with a yarmulke on.
You
and
can't go to
tzitzis,
Bethlehem as a Jew. Bethlehem is Arab controlled right now, so only Christians can go there. Jews may not go to any religious site that is controlled by them.
Yeah, in Israel, anybody of any religion can go anywhere.
Yeah.
I think that's a context that people need to understand. And when people say, "Hey, from the river to the sea," well, where do we go?
Yeah, before Israel fought in the 6-Day War for Jerusalem, for the Western Wall, we never even saw the Western Wall. We were there. I mean, Jews were in Israel for a very long time. That part was, some may say, occupied, and we were not able to see the wall. I mean, there are beautiful pictures of soldiers seeing the wall for the first time. So in Israeli hands, these places of worship are open.
Yeah, and in the other side, it's not.
It's not.
And I know I've asked a lot of tough questions.
Mm-hmm.
And I was very critical, but I think it's important to be critical because you want to have people answer and address these criticisms so that people can get a clearer context.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not a representative. I'm an individual with experience, but
yeah,
I definitely appreciate the honest questions.
And one of the things, too, that you got to understand is that if I were to talk to an an ardent Palestinian supporter, it would be almost impossible to have a calm, open-ended dialogue where I'm expressing criticism because it would either get hyper emotional. The side would either get hyper emotional and try to use like very supercharged emotional rhetoric, or they wouldn't want to speak to me, or they would just get really angry.
I've seen some podcasts that are level-headed and honest. I think Lex Friedman has one.
Lex Friedman was good.
Yeah,
he's really good.
But
it's hard. It just feels harder, if that makes sense.
It does, and it's very emotionally fueled on both sides, because I feel like the Palestinian cause is saying, I want to go back 70 years, and this is all going to be ours. Israel has existed. Generations of people have lived there. I really, my hope is that people can kind of come together and be like, okay, this is where we at. This is where we are right now. What can we do to move forward for everybody to have a better outcome of life? And that's my one hope, that we can kind of just, both sides can just look to the future instead of avenging the past on both sides.
I mean, I think that asking the Hamas leaders to turn themselves in or pressuring Qatar to, not provide refuge to Hamas officials should be pretty unifying on both sides, is what I think.
Yeah, it's a pattern of history where people come to power, take the riches, fuck off, go to offshore places, and the civilians suffer. I mean, this is fiefdoms in Europe, and I mean any example in history of leadership. This is kind of what aristocracy does, and this is what the Palestinian aristocracy is sitting in Qatar for. I mean, and a lot of the other countries don't want to absorb the Palestinians. Part of it is because the Palestinians say we're not going anywhere, and I get that. And part of it is because it's having them there is is a pawn, and it's part of the game.
Yeah.
So
it's politicized, when you keep them there. Well, they used to allow Palestinians to go emigrate freely throughout the Muslim world, and then once the 1950s happened, they stopped because there is a strategic advantage to keeping the Palestinians there in that region when they, and create a narrative of them constantly being attacked all the time. And then when you put ammunition centers next to hospitals and elementary schools, it's easy to feed that type of propaganda, and that's what they're doing. And also, a lot of these countries, like the Palestinian region now, is like a net importer of terrorists. Like Arab countries import their terrorists to Gaza because they don't want them there.
I'm not sure.
That's what my chiropractor who lives there was telling me, that a lot of like actual terrorists or people that they don't want in other countries will just get sent to that region.
I'm not sure if there's like an ISIS-like worldwide recruitment. I'm not sure. I from the way that I see it, it just feels so multifaceted and cultural to want to destroy Israel that it's very hard to move forward, and it's very hard to I mean, I don't, I saw some people chanting like, Hamas leave us alone in Gaza. I mean, some people understand it, but they're under a dictatorship. And I think it is in Israelis' interest and in everyone's interest to let these civilians, live civilian lives. The ability to make money and industry, which is what I think would be ideal for the area. For people to have a different purpose except revenge.
Yeah.
You know?
Did Israel actually bomb and block? Because I'm hearing this too. I just want to know.
Yeah.
Did they actually bomb the exits and like? Cause
No.
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 That isn't true.
When I saw that, I spoke to my friends at the IDF, and they were saying if you look at the footage, and you'll see that there's nothing that falls from the sky onto it. The explosive came from the vehicle itself. Israel wouldn't do that. Just like Israel said we wouldn't bomb the hospital itself, and it didn't. There's no reason why Israel would bomb people trying to go to the places where Israel is telling them to go.
Okay.
When we watch the video, try to see if there's something that falls onto there's nothing. If there were, you would see a big thing that kind of falls onto, there's nothing there.
Okay.
It just seems like an explosion from the inside.
Okay. I mean, yeah, and when you're dealing with a war like this, it's very easy to kind of create propaganda, and if they blow up their own exit ramps after they escape, they could very easily just say Israel did it, and because of the amount of anti-Semitism that exists and anti-Israel sentiment, and anti-American interventionism, which unfortunately Israel and American interventionism are tied together, which is a shitty thing, and I don't like it, but that's just how a lot of people see it. Mm-hmm. It's easy to create the narrative that Israel blew these that Israel destroyed the exit pathways, and people will just believe it because of these internalized biases.
Yeah. Unfortunately, because of this culture of martyrdom.
Yeah.
Hamas wants people to die. It helps their cause. It helps them get more money for humanitarian aid. When Israel says, hey, we're going to bring down this building, please leave. I mean, there are thousands of videos of Israeli pilots seeing civilians in the parking lots of their targets and having to turn around. Even though they warned everybody. There are also recordings of Palestinian fathers saying, we want to die for this cause. We're not going anywhere. Is that everybody? Of course not. Of course not. But Hamas wants people to die. And they keep saying that. They keep saying, we love death like Israel loves life. It doesn't matter how many people have to die for this cause. So everyone's like, how could they better surgically do this? But I mean, it's so ingrained in the culture. I don't understand what more the IDF could do to preserve civilian life, as opposed to Hamas, which targets civilian life.
Yeah, it's horrible what's happening.
It is.
Anyway.
For everybody.
For everybody. Anyway, Nina, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you.
I really appreciate this.
It's been
like
a pleasure.
I said, if I was asking tough questions, it's all just about context in a very complicated situation. One of the things too, that I also have an issue with, not with you, this is nothing to do with you,
Okay.
but just in terms of how people are addressing the conflict, just when people start people talk about, hey, don't warmonger, don't do this, don't do that. I feel as though anytime you post any war footage or war videos, especially before you've had a chance to corroborate whether it's real or not, you know?
Yeah.
And stating it as an actual fact, that is warmongering in and of itself.
Yeah.
Like when people said, hey, Israel bombed the hospital, and everybody on social media was posting this.
All the news. The New York Times,
the everybody did this, right? Like, the same people that'll say, hey, you're a warmonger, or you're a Zionist, or you're this because you want Israel to exist as a sovereign country, they're not all of a sudden they're not warmongers when they're posting stuff about the hospital, or when they post a bunch of footage of bombings without putting it into context and explaining why these things are happening and what the actual cause of it is, or explaining just like explaining the actual cause of like why this is actually happening, or putting it into a broader context, and dismantling all the propaganda. Like when you just post sensationalized videos, you're warmongering too, because the only way that this war continues, and the only way that you devolve into a World War III type scenario, and create something horrible as a result of it, which only people in extreme levels of power benefit from, is by sharing violent videos in an attempt to stir up emotions.
Yeah, and the IDF and Hamas are held to completely different standards. So the IDF has to check with lawyers, check with everybody before they release a statement. And by the time the statement is ready, the conversation has moved on. Such is the case for the hospital. Such is the case for how many Israelis were killed. We're still counting. There are charred bodies that we don't know who belongs to what, where to put anybody. I mean, and Hamas is just able to, there's nobody and nothing that's fact checking their numbers, fact checking their claims, and that it just feels, it just doesn't feel right. When one organization is trying their best to comply and trying their best to be honest, and the other one can just say whatever they want.
Yeah, it can also explain why one side is winning the information war right now, and it's not us, and that actually puts into context in a very realistic way.
I'm not sure if that's the case. I hope it isn't.
I hope so too. I hope I'm wrong, but from what I see right now on my social media, it is concerning, and I do feel as though we are losing, like the Israeli side and the Jewish side is losing the narrative, and what you just said explains why that is true in a very, very logical and pervasive sense that other people need to understand.
And it also, the news cycle continues, right? So
by the
1,500, what does that fucking matter to anybody?
Yeah.
People already forgot. There are still bodies being found.
By the time the truth about whatever atrocity gets committed gets uncovered, the next atrocity happens anyway, and that the other side that doesn't check with lawyers and fact checkers and security and review boards, they're the ones that get to win these propaganda battles, and that's unfortunate.
Yeah.
All right, Nina, sorry about that. How do we get a hold of you?
I don't know.
Like, do you have an Instagram or social media or anything like that, or
no?
No, nothing. No. All right. Well, like I said, Nina, thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate the fact that we had this discussion. It's important. Hopefully, that people that listen to this episode got a chance to put into context what's going on, and hopefully people on both sides of this aisle can have a rational and measured discussion about what to do, so that more people don't die senselessly as a result of this, and we can move on and move forward from this in a positive manner. So Nina, thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
I want to say one more thing. In conclusion, I truly believe that a lot of people want the same thing, which is for both sides to be able to live in peace and to have a good quality of life. And people will conflate, Hamas with the Palestinians. I don't think that's always the case. I think Palestinian civilians and the IDF and Israelis have the common goal of letting Palestinians live the most enriched, purposeful, productive life with opportunity in the pursuit of happiness in our Western lens. And I pray for that.
Yeah. Nina, thank you so much.
Thank
I really
you very
appreciate
much.
it. Hopefully this can get resolved within our lifetimes. But look, I think both Arabs and Muslims and Jews and Christians, everybody should have equal access to Jerusalem in that area, because it's holy territory for everybody, and everybody should be able to worship God the way that they were born to, because the closer connection to God makes the world a better, happier, more productive, and less angry place.
I hope so.
So thank you so much.